there and welcome back to Don't Open That Door. Come along with our triumvirate of terror as we descend into darkness, hurtle into horror, and plunge into peril. If you've ever made a home movie, you're in the right place. I'm Justin, and older women need love too.
I'm Nico, and if you actually call it X and not Twitter, you're a fucking lame. And that includes you, Justin.
Well, I'm Dan, and I have a strong heart.
And we're here today to review X, the one that came out in 2022. That's right, it was directed by Ty West, starring Mia Goth as both Maxine and Pearl, Jenna Ortega as Lorraine, Brittany Snow as Bobby Lynn, Scott Mescudi, better known to the world as Kid Cudi, as Jackson, Martin Henderson as Wayne, and Stephen Uri as Howard. We open in Texas in the vintage year of 1979. Two officers have been called to a house out in the sticks. There, they find a bloody massacre, and we cut back to 24 hours earlier to find out what happened. So now we start for real with aspiring pornographer Wayne. He's taking a trip out to that same rural house along with female talent Bobby Lynn and Maxine, who also happens to be his girlfriend, and Jackson, the male talent. Auteur cameraman RJ is also along for the ride with his girlfriend Lorraine in tow. Their goal is to make a great goddamn porno. For more on that, Dan, what's good?
Well, the group get to the house, and after some tense negotiations with Howard, who's the extremely old owner of the property, they pay him and move into the guest house. They waste no time and get right down to filming, and Maxine heads out to the local lake where the audience learns that an alligator or crocodile, not really sure, lives there. Afterwards, Maxine heads up to the main house. There she meets Pearl, who's Howard's wife, and discovers that Pearl definitely has some caged desires.
Mhm.
Yeah. So Maxine then heads down to the guest house and films a scene with Jackson. Unbeknownst to the group, Pearl actually watches them have sex, and the fire of desire is lit within her.
For more on that, we go to local gilf hunter Nico. What's good?
I just want everyone to know that I just Googled, do crocodiles or alligators live in Texas? And I got the American alligator is the only crocodilian native to Texas. So fuck me, I guess.
All right.
So that night, Pearl tries to get sexy with Howard, but Howard says that his heart just can't take having sex. So that's that. He doesn't got the goods anymore. Meanwhile, back at the guest house, Bobby Lynn sings a beautiful song, and then the group has a conversation about sex. Lorraine says that she wants to film a scene for the movie, jumping in and taking some initiative, which emotionally just crushes RJ. Later on, while everyone's asleep, RJ decides to leave because he, I don't know, doesn't like seeing his girlfriend involved in this kind of stuff. He gets in the van, but finds Pearl outside, and she starts to come on to him. And understandably, he doesn't want anything to do with that. Unfortunately, that doesn't work out well in his favor because she stabs him multiple times, super duper killing him.
Well, luckily, I've managed to avoid something like that happening to me. So, Lorraine wakes up and realizes that RJ is missing. Wayne also wakes up and decides to help her look for him. Unfortunately for Wayne, though, he chooses to look in the barn where he steps on a very large nail and is then stabbed in the head with a pitchfork by Pearl.
Mm.
Lorraine, on the other hand, makes her way over to the main house where Howard tricks her and locks her in the basement. While down there, she finds a corpse hanging from the ceiling. Good grief, Charlie Brown. Dan, what happens next?
So Howard heads over to the guest house and tells Jackson that Pearl is missing. Ever the Good Samaritan, Jackson agrees to help. Howard leads him over to the lake and shoots him in the chest, killing him. Meanwhile, Pearl sneaks into the house and climbs into bed with Maxine, who screams upon realizing that Pearl is in bed with her. Bobby Lynn runs into the room, but Pearl is already gone. Bobby Lynn heads out to find Pearl and finds her over by the lake. She tries to be nice, but Pearl insults her and then pushes her into the lake where the alligator crocodile thing eats her.
Well, Nico, I know that this definitely evokes a desire in people of a certain age. Why don't you elaborate more?
What? What does that mean, Justin?
You'll tell me.
Uh, so I guess this turns on the old folks.
Really?
Not Justin's terrible metaphors, but the events of the movie. Because Howard and Pearl head over to the guest house and make whoopee while Maxine hides under the bed. She escapes and heads over to the main house where she then frees Lorraine, who is immediately and might I add, kind of hilariously
Yeah.
killed by Howard. She goes fucking flying like it's a video game. Anyway, Howard and Pearl drag Lorraine's body inside the house, but her body has a death spasm, which takes Howard by surprise, causing him to have a heart attack. Maxine then draws a pistol that she took from Wayne's van and tries to shoot Pearl, but the gun is unloaded. Pearl, pear
Here's a trap for you, motherfucker.
a sentient pear then grabs Howard's gun. No, Pearl grabs Howard's gun and tries to shoot Maxine, but the recoil knocks her down and she breaks her hip.
Oh, my hip.
Well, Dan, you're right about that. Why don't you just keep going with that train of thought? What happens next?
Well, Pearl crawls outside while Maxine gets into Howard's truck. Maxine backs the car up over her head, killing her, then drives away into the sunrise. The movie ends as we cut back to the cops from the beginning as they discover RJ's camera. They postulate as to what might be on it, and one of them replies, "One goddamn fucked up horror picture." The end.
Well, all right then. Let's go ahead and get down to brass tacks, shall we? Nico, how does this one sound?
I really like the way this one sounds. Everyone's accents were really pleasing to my ear for some reason. I just liked how everybody sounded. But I also was a huge fan of the sound direction in terms of the different tracks that they use here. Like, they're all immediately relevant as to why they're playing each and every single time. Like, there's one track from, I think, Chelsea Wolfe that is called Headlights, which turns on for about like 10 seconds when Pearl is stabbing RJ to death in the headlights, for example. And they also got Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper, which is one just sort of a universal callback to the 70s, as well as something that deals with, death and stuff. So just every soundtrack, every song that's in the soundtrack was very intentional and not just there to be like pleasing to the ear as well. It's like it has meaning to it. So
Yeah, I was totally going to say, Nico, this is for both you and Dan. Chelsea Wolfe teamed up with Tyler Bates, and they pretty much wrote a good number of tracks on the actual official soundtrack album for this. So yeah, definitely interesting. For sure. But Dan, speaking of soundtracks, how did the soundtrack track with you?
I mean, I agree with Nico. I don't have too much else to add in that regard. I think it was great musical choices. The one thing about sound that I would say is if you have neighbors, I live in an apartment building, right? So there were several times where I had to like turn the volume almost all the way down because this movie is about making a porno. So there are some graphic sounds and moaning and things. So just like that. So just beware if you do have neighbors or people you may or may not want to hear things like that.
You know what? Just don't watch this movie in public, like on the train or anything like that, or on the bus.
or at
Yeah,
work.
that too. I'm so glad I did it. Oh my God. I do that sometimes and wow.
Yep. And I will say as well, like, even today when I watched the movie, I had to tell Bonner, like, yo, bro, I know what it sounds like, but I'm not just like full tilt in the living room watching something like that. I'm watching something that's about people making something like that. So it is what it is on that front, I guess. And I agree with both of you, to be real. I think that I like what I heard. But also, I like the soundtrack. I like Chelsea Wolfe. And to follow up what Nico said, I like the accents too. In particular, I really liked Bobby Lynn. I thought she had quite the voice even in the singing parts. Now, looks. Dan, how'd the movie look to you?
That looked great. I thought the colors were really cool. It was an interesting choice, I thought, when Pearl kills RJ and the headlights of the car and everything
Yeah.
kind of turns red and even the headlights turn red. And I wasn't really expecting that because up until then, everything in the film was like realistic,
Mm-hmm.
And not that that scene looked otherworldly or weird, but just headlights aren't red. So that kind of took me by surprise, but I liked it. And there were a couple other things throughout the film that they did similar to that, but I really liked the direction. And Nico had mentioned earlier there was a drone shot of one of the characters swimming in the lake or just lounging in the lake, and I actually really like that drone shot. And lastly, I think I'm not really sure how I like it, but there were a few times throughout the film where they did very quick cuts to a different scene,
Yes.
and they would do
I
like
love
a
that shit.
very quick cut and then stay 3 or 4 seconds on one scene, then really quick flash over to the other scene. And they would do that 4 or 5 times. I don't dislike it. I'm not sure I like it either. I don't really know how I feel about it.
So the way I feel about it is like it's very obviously like, filmmaking is one of the themes in the movie. And I think what they were doing there is mirroring the sort of like narrative arc of both the scenes that they were shooting with Wayne et al, as well as whichever characters were off doing whatever the fuck elsewhere, sort of like giving it more of a distinctly like there's almost I don't know what the name for this is, like meta text or something, but like, there's a story within a story happening, and it's like the cuts seem to like mirror that, is the way that I thought about it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I see the point, Nico. I see the point. And just generally, how do you think about the way the movie looked?
I was a really big fan of the prosthetics that they used on Mia Goth to turn her into Pearl. Like at first, I couldn't tell that it was her, both characters, but like especially on the scenes where the camera is really zoomed in on like her hands and stuff, they look sufficiently just much more gaunt and lifeless. And the design, the visuals, just every time Pearl was on screen, I just couldn't keep my eyes away from her, as attractive as the rest of the movie is.
The first time I saw this movie, I did not know that Mia Goth played Pearl. I only learned that this time around. So credit to them for that. I will also say I thought it was a funny little choice where the movie opens up in, like a square resolution and then it like fills out to fill up the whole
Yeah,
screen. I thought that was pretty funny because sometimes we do see as a stylistic choice, people change the I said resolution.
aspect
I meant to
ratio.
say fucking like aspect ratio. Yeah. Cause remember the lighthouse? That one was in a different kind of aspect ratio, at least partially, from what I
Yeah.
remember. But there's that. Now I want to go ahead and this film has been called an homage to horror films of the past. Quick note, what influential films had an influence on this film?
The only one that comes to mind for me is the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, to be honest, because the only other thing that's really pervading in my mind is like the general, sex sells kind of mantra that a lot of slashers have, which this
Mhm.
obviously very much is, full of.
I agree with you on the Texas Chainsaw comment. There was a point in the movie, can't remember which kill it was, but when Pearl kills somebody, I was like, man, she would fit in with the family in Texas Chainsaw.
Yeah.
She's just like maybe not quite as demented or twisted, but like close and gave me sort of a similar vibe as that family did.
The one where she killed Wayne got me the most with those sorts of vibes. Just like sticking him with the sort of three-pronged, just hay bale, trident, whatever the fuck you want to call it, in the
Pitchfork.
eyes. Pitchfork, yeah, that's the word. Like, that shit was brutal, man. And they go
Yeah.
back to this shot twice, which I was
Yeah.
not expecting.
Farmer Brown, send me your trident at once.
Hey, look, man.
No, you're right though. And I gotta say, for me, another movie that kind of stuck out maybe is Friday the 13th, because there's a part where they go into a first person point of view. I think it might be when Pearl is going into the bedroom with Maxine,
Sure.
and there's like the breathing, but it's not obviously the chat. You can't do that. But I kind of want to follow up on that with another question. So this film has been said to be an example of two different types. First, a modern critique of old school sexploitation, as well as a foray into the psycho biddy genre, where it's typically
That sounds fake.
what you
I
want.
know it must be real, but that sounds fake, man.
Listen, life is like, bro. Life is like.
Life is like,
But
The English teacher in me right now is going insane.
how do you feel this film explores both sides of that? The psycho biddy portion as well as the sexploitation side.
I was going to ask if it's possible to explain what psychobiddy is. I mean, I
Yeah,
understand it's
please.
Absolutely.
a lady who is going crazy killing people, but
Absolutely.
like what's
So
deeper?
it is a genre where specifically an elderly woman, whether through just cognitive decline or just general evil vibes, starts murdering the shit out of people. And that is apparently a trope that was very common back in the day. Some might consider Baba Yaga to fall under that, but
I think that Baba Yaga had all her agency, actually.
well, Psycho Biddy doesn't necessarily require that someone doesn't. It's just lack of faculties could drive someone in that direction, but it's not necessarily cut and dry that way.
So it's older lady killing people.
Essentially, yes.
Huh.
Okay.
To be honest, I didn't even realize that was its own subgenre until just now. So, I mean, but sure. I mean, this genre is wide and varied as the ocean. So, fuck yeah, no. What was the other question? Part of the question? I just completely lost the plot.
Sexploitation, a modern take
Right.
on an old school sexploitation film.
Right.
Do you think this intelligently explores that?
I think so, yeah. Like, I think there is, like, definitely a possibility for, to the credit of RJ's original motivation, he wanted to, actually give it a little something of the auteur secret sauce, if you will, make it into like actual cinema. So he says, and I think there is, definitely that's something that's definitely possible. But like, I just really appreciate how the film goes from kind of just like an artsy sort of take on making porn to just a full-on crazed slasher, and it does it just, I think, incredibly well.
Mm-hmm. Dan?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd agree. I'm going to kind of twist the question or take it maybe in a slightly different direction.
Oh,
And I guess this actually also kind of goes back to an earlier question that I didn't really think about much, but it does remind me very much of slashers. And I think it kind of takes a slasher, the typical slasher, to the next level because, like in a lot of slashers, you have the sex crazed teens or whatever.
Yeah.
yeah.
And this is like the next level of that. They're not only sort of sex crazed, but they're making a sex film, So
Mhm.
like it's quite literally the embodiment of sex and sin and everything that they're now like killing people. But yeah, I mean, as far as like sexploitation films, I pretty much agree with what Nico says.
I will say I haven't seen very many sexploitation films, so I'm not as like educated on that genre as others, but I don't think that anything in this movie was crass. If I can just say that really quick. It was all very intentional, and none of it was just like there was nothing that was, I don't think, necessarily base, even though they are making like porn in this. I didn't think it didn't come off as crude. Jesus Christ. Why do I do a podcast with you two motherfuckers? Insane.
Go ahead, finish your point. It was well thought
No,
out
that
and
was the end of it.
educational.
That was the
Okay.
end.
Okay, there you go.
You finished?
You say nothing was base. Did we really need the cum rag scene? Is that
Okay,
necessary?
That's true.
I forgot about the cum rag scene. I'll put a big asterisk there.
No, ironically, independent of this film, I actually just watched
Oh,
a
no.
sexploitation joint from, I think it's the 70s, called
Oh.
Attack of the Killer Bee Girls. And I mean,
So are they
a lot of,
bees?
yeah. And
Hell yeah.
You really like
A-
B movies, don't you?
shut the fuck up. True.
Is that a
But-
thing? Is that
I
a
think
thing
that's
for
a
you?
thing.
But, you know, a lot of titty in that one too, I'd say. But surprisingly,
Is your
even
fantasy
going,
to be a worker drone, Justin?
Surf the Queen.
it's not a fantasy.
Wow.
Oh.
And I will
I'm
say,
worried.
surprisingly, this film obviously take things up a notch, but not to the point that you would think. Like, even back in the day, those sexploitation films could get kind of wild sometimes. So
I believe
Yeah.
it.
I agree with you, Nico. Now, I do want to ask, do you have a favorite character?
I think my favorite character is Lorraine. I like her character arc. I think it has a really satisfying end and turn, both in terms of her own character development and just how, for the sake of this being a horror movie, she gets added to our list of people who have now subscribed to God's mailing list, I guess. But just like, I don't know, it was a refreshing thing to see where she goes and tries to successfully, asserts her individuality, agency, and her sexuality when she actually gets involved in the movie. And I think RJ's response to that is just fucking hysterical, considering in that same scene he was going on about how, like, women should be independent and, it's just sex. It's not love necessarily.
Just a movie.
It's just a movie. It's nothing that
It's just
serious. And
acting.
then he goes and has his own little the best way I can describe it is that one episode of the Boondocks where they just play Let It Burn from Usher for like the entire goddamn time.
And Tom's out there in the fucking rain and
Yup.
shit. Yeah, those who don't know. But I will say, and we can talk about this right fast, this is taking a little bit away from the what would you do, but that's fine. I thought that was a little bit of a yellow/red card. And the reason being
How so?
is I think because they're in a relationship. And to me, that's something like if you don't even discuss that, with your partner at all, like that's like a boundary that needs to be discussed, like that can't just be something that's like, that was a very unilateral move on her part. So I feel like if that's the case, because afterwards she's just like, I didn't mean to hurt him. And I'm like, the fuck did you think would happen? Like, everyone has like a,
Well, I mean, based off of his earlier points, I think she probably expected that he'd be cool with it.
well, I think there's a difference between saying like, oh, I think, women have the right to, take part in pornography and do whatever they want to do versus I think my girlfriend should fuck this dude and I want to film it. Like, I think there's a pretty big line there. And I think that's why. Now, granted, if I was RJ, I would just be like, yo, listen, I'm not super comfortable with this. So if you do this, like, we're through. Just so you know. Because that's within my wheelhouse to do. So if I'm not comfortable with it, then that's just not something I want to proceed with a relationship with.
Yeah,
You can do what
certainly.
you want to do. But I wouldn't like go cry in the fucking shower about it and then leave. Like, first off, I'm still getting paid. I'm not going to come here, lose my girlfriend. Also, quick side note, don't bring your fucking girl to a porn shoot. Like, let's just get that one out of the way. Like, don't bring your girl to this porn shoot in the middle of the fucking woods where everyone's super sexed up, bro.
Unless they're in the industry, because otherwise, how fucking weird would that be?
Yeah, she also is like not in the industry. She just helps him sometimes with his sound equipment. So I was like, nah, bro, that's already like, you was looking for your girl to get rizzed up. So I'm sorry, bro. That's already a negativo. But
my personal headcanon is a little bit different from all of this because in my head, Wayne is the guy's last name.
Oh, yeah?
And his first name is Bruce.
Mm.
Oh, yeah?
And this is all just what Batman did in the 70s with all of his inheritance money.
This is how he made even
He
more money.
just
It's how
took
he
a
built his
sharp
empire.
fucking turn. He built the Batcave on independent creators.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Dan, did you have a favorite character?
I would say It was Maxine.
Why is that?
I just kind of liked how she was like, I deserve more out of life and I'm going to do what I
She was so
can,
charismatic.
you know? Yeah. And I just kind of like that. I thought that was kind of cool. And then, it was an interesting little plot twist. Not really, but like at the end of the film, like throughout the film, they show like there's a TV evangelist type show going
Hmm.
on, and at the end, it's revealed that the pastor is like talking, like his daughter is Maxine,
Yeah.
and he's like,
Yes.
"Oh, they've taken her from me. She's gone to the dark side. Whatever, whatever." But I thought that was like an interesting little twist that we might talk about in a moment. I don't know. But I just thought her character was pretty interesting.
It's funny that you say that, Dan. Maxine was my least favorite
Mm.
character, and I thought she did not have any charisma. I didn't like get
Wow.
her. And for me, my favorite character is fucking Bobby Lynn, bro. She completely stole the show for me. I mean, I think she was just really attractive, but she had a ton of charisma. I thought all her parts were perfect. And to be honest, I was sad to see her go because she seemed like a really cool person. And there's going to be a sequel, and I would have loved to see her in a sequel. So it's kind of unfortunate for me that she's gone. But I will also ask, and we're gonna stretch into the what would you do here, but we're gonna change it a little bit because I feel like for some of these slashers, we've hit a lot of the same points and we'd really just go stomp out two old people. So
Yeah.
Easily.
now I want to instead just get what's your take? And Nico already kind of hit on one of the topics that I said, which was, the whole situation going on with Lorraine. But Dan, I have just a quick question for you. So Jackson, he's a Marine, and when the old guy asks, Wayne, did he serve? Wayne's like, nah, I got flat feet, which is a lame excuse, Trump. And I think that there's a part of Jackson that's just like proud of what he's done because Jackson's like, me, I served, and I don't want no farmer shooting at me. And then immediately after, when the old guy comes for help, Jackson is more than willing to help. So what's your take on the film's characterization of Jackson in general? Because when someone's like, "Oh, he's the male talent in a porno," I mean, you're kind of like, no one really wants to see you like that. But he actually, I don't know. How do you think the movie characterizes him?
I just like that they gave him a shot where he was just like fully just pendulously hanging in the
Mhm.
shadow of the door's light.
Yep.
Thank you for that, Nico.
You're
Dan, how
welcome.
about you?
Well, that aside, I thought it was pretty cool. I think it gave him extra character and it made him a really likable character, in my opinion. Like you said, it wasn't just a porn star guy. Um, and I think he was probably the most upstanding individual in the cast
Yeah.
in the group, really.
None of the others would have offered to help the old man. I guarantee goddamn to you that.
No, and even when he knew something was afoot, like he was still trying to help the old man when he found like their car in the lake.
Yo,
And
would you get into that lake?
no,
Correct
no.
answer. Correct fucking answer.
But I thought it added extra depth and extra dimension to him.
Nico, I'm going to swing to you with this question here.
Okay.
Do you consider Howard, do you think he's doing these things because he's evil, or do you think he knows what Pearl is like, and so he's essentially trying to cover for her? What's your
Both.
take?
100%
Both?
both. Yeah, like he is very clearly still in love with Pearl, and I would argue very just like down horrendous because dude could I don't know, probably just walk away. Not that you I don't know. I thought he was a really interesting villain. I thought he was a really interesting villain because at first he's intimidating just because of his general demeanor, but then we see the more sinister side of both him and Pearl, and I think his motivations sort of in line with there being, sex workers in the guest house, and his whole conflict is he can't get it up anymore or he'll die. So I just think it was very well implemented personally.
All right. And now I'm going to swing this question to the whole group here. I have read that Pearl is meant to be a somewhat sympathetic villain. given her backstory of, she wanted to be a dancer, but that just wasn't something she was allowed to do. And she has this kind of unexplored sexuality, I guess. And especially in her youth, her husband was gone for both world wars. And just generally, she has a lot of pent up sexuality. So, do we feel bad for her in any way, shape, or form?
I do to a certain extent. I don't know how much exactly, but I think her prominence was as a way to, and I could be completely wrong on this, so someone can feel free to check this later, I guess. But I feel like Ty West planned this originally as a trilogy, focusing on the characters, both Pearl and Maxine. So I think making her more of a character that has at least potential to be sympathetic makes sense in terms of his own world building and establishing the sort of main players in this trilogy of his.
Interesting point, because I can tell you Pearl came out the same year as X.
The
So they
same
were
year?
Yes. So they were
Damn.
clearly working on them, if not side by side, very damn near.
Mm-hmm. Because Mia Goth is the, lead figure in all of them, so.
Correct. Dan, are you sympathetic at all to Pearl?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I can kind of understand where she's coming from, and waited her whole life for her husband, and now when she finally has him, like, he's too old, and honestly, she's probably too old too, or at least mostly that to that point, anyways. And I kind of understand and sympathetic, but it does get to a point where it's like, okay, well, you're a crazy lady, and it kind of turns and twists that a little bit. But yeah, I think so.
I'll say this much. I am sympathetic up to a point. And for me, that point was like when she was in the cut watching him make a film like that, I was like, hey, you know what? You know what? That's just all right with me. I mean, it's meant to be watched anyways.
So would you, if you saw this and you looked in the middle of coitus, saw her through the window, would you just be like, all right, old woman?
See,
Am
he would be texting and look up from his text and be like, oh, there's
Question for you. Am I like filming like a porno shoot, or is it like a private encounter? Because that to me is the difference.
I mean, this movie is a porno, so
All right.
a
Well,
porno.
if I'm over here like, making something for Boink Bros.
Wait.
then-
You would be more focused at work than during sex? With a partner, I mean.
Well, I mean, again, let me restate here. If I'm working for Boink Bros and we're putting together a scene and I'm piping, and then there's like an 80-year-old woman in the cut watching me, I mean, to me, that's no different than if like I'm an artist in the studio and then like someone walks into the studio. Like people walk into the studio. I'm not gonna let that bug me or interrupt my flow.
I think there's a difference between someone walking into the studio and a creepy ass old woman walking into the studio, bro. You're telling
Listen.
me that if you were putting down some lyrical fire and this old, like, house on haunted hill looking ass woman with the wedding dress comes in, the frail hair, and, like, does a creepy little stare, you wouldn't be a little, verklempt?
If she wanted some dope hip hop music, then yeah, I think she can watch. And similarly, if Howard ain't beat back them cobwebs, bro, then you know what? I hope she gets some kind of entertainment from this because she need it, clearly.
Jesus,
So
man.
I just listen, man, and that's the thing. And real talk, I'm not saying RJ should have smashed, but if RJ had smashed, she'd have all walked out of there okay. So I don't even know. I don't even know what we're trying to say here. There you go, audience. Nico did this. He set me up. You set me up, Nico.
Sure.
And with that, we go to the critic review. Peel behind the curtain. It's been a little bit, audience, since we did an episode. And let's see if Nico and Dan have their prophetic skills intact. What do you guys think critics gave this on Rotten Tomatoes? Where's it sitting right now?
I'm going to double down onto the bit because the bit is kind of the subject matter, and I'm going to guess 69. Even though I really like this movie and I feel like it probably has good reviews, I'm still going to guess 69.
Nice. I'm gonna say 85.
Well, Dan, you win
Yeah.
because the movie's sitting at a 94%
Mm.
on Rotten Tomatoes, fresh from critics. Audience a little bit less enthusiastic at 75%. But I want to know what you guys think. Give me just one sentence, maybe two, maybe three. What's your score and what's your general thoughts?
I kind of loved this. I think this is fantastically done, both in terms of cinematography and how they structure the horror of it all. I'm gonna give it a 90.
All right. I'm not super enthusiastic about this. I feel like for me personally, it's pretty, but there's not like a ton for me that sets this apart from the stuff that influenced it. And I don't know, it's not for me, it's not like, Cabin in the Woods was a critique of like a lot of different things and like a, take on it.
Mm-hmm.
I think this didn't hit the same way for me that did.
Well,
So
this isn't a satire, so
no, not at all. But I still think that it's trying to say something, and
sure.
I
Yeah.
think that I'm not super enthusiastic about it. I think it was a good movie though. So I'm actually right there with the audience. I give it a 75.
Yeah, I agree with that. I thought it was a pretty good movie. It looked great. It sounded great. It hit a lot of the boxes. But for me, in movies, especially in horror, you have to suspend your disbelief a little bit.
Yeah.
But I don't know, one or two of the kills I thought were like feasible, but for most of the movie, I was like, just kick them. Like it would be so easy. There's no threat. There's very little threat, I should say. There were too many times where a character would just be face to face with the person, and either Howard or Pearl would be very threatening, and like, okay, there's something's going to go down, and you could literally just like push them over, and then you'd be good, and
You're not
again, like,
wrong.
I try to suspend my disbelief a lot, but that kept coming up to me on this one. But I still enjoyed it. I'm right there with Justin, 75.
Well, all right. Would we recommend this one?
Definitely.
I think so, yeah.
I would as well. But probably no Golden Seal though.
No.
Nah.
I will say just a quick closing note. This is a A24 film and definitely unlike any other A24 film I've seen.
Oh, I thought it felt like
Just
an
to-
A24 film.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah, for sure.
Nico, A24 or no A24?
I mean, I think it is definitely sex positive, and that's definitely on brand for A24. It's got good cinematography.
So,
it's
audience, if you want to
pretty.
hear what we've said, not playing, go ahead. I'm sorry. Keep going. You do this to me all the time. So,
Yeah, I think it fits. Yeah, 100%.
all right. So, listener, we want to know what you've got to say. Are we right? Are we wrong? Are we wrong?
I was
Which is
just
what we
trying
all
to
put
think of that
together.
too, and I was like, it's the same.
Incredible.
Right or wrong is still going to be the same.
Let us know. We're on X, not the movie, and Instagram at DOTD Horror. We're also on Facebook. That's Don't Open That Door. Plus, you can check out everything we've done on our website. That is, of course, dotdhorror.com. And if you can drop us a like, a review, a follow, whatever you can, it helps tremendously. But till next time, take care of one another.
Wear a fucking condom.
Nico
Whatever
says
Justin's
that.
about to say. Okay, good.
Also, be sure to take care of one another. But as always, dear listener, don't open that door. Bye.